not enough. It's not enough. Not enough. Go, everybody. Well, this is the harder part of this deal, and that's the welding up of all of this stuff that I've forged up. It's the hardest part, really, honestly, this is probably the hardest part to learn for people getting into this. And I know I make it particularly easy, but I've done something like 3,000 of these. So I've done this weld at least 3,000 times. And you notice that I have a weird stance with this. How do I do this? This rod's really flexy. And I find until the rod gets a little shorter, it's much easier to maintain that precision if I hold this more like a TIG gun. This is where having an apprentice would come in as I get this welded. It would behoove me to have somebody go back and knock the weld slag off of those and check the welds. I didn't realize how hard difficult this little weld that I'm doing here was until my good friend, who is a professional pipe fitter, came one day and thought he was going to help me, and he tried to do a few of these welds, and he was really struggling with it. They don't have to be perfect, but I try to get them as close to the same every time as I can. And of course, because I'm buying the rod, I try to utilize all of it as I can. I try to waste as little of this as I can. You'll notice that I brace myself against this. Just like that, once in a while. It's good. And that's the one that I'll have to re-weld. About 1 in, I don't know, 1 in 15 or something. The weld, I'll get a little frosty in the weld and I'll have to go back in and re-weld it. But this is the best way I have found to do this. and I weld these. I don't slug weld these. A lot of people go, and there's a hole there, and I could slug weld it, but the reason I don't slug weld them is because if you slug weld them, the scale from the weld and the heat distortion and the color from the weld shows up on the front, on the top plate. And that means I'd have to go back in and I'd have to clean all that off, and then I'd have to put the whole unit back in the forge and rescale the whole thing. And so that adds like 4 steps. And so I don't have to charge twice as much for these. This is why I do it this way. Of course, invariably, once in a while, it'll stick, and you'll get that scab. That's not that big of a deal on this stuff. A lot of that'll come off, but I really try to avoid doing that scratch on this. A little unprofessional. Looks a little unprofessional. A lot of times, what I'll do is I'll pick out the ones that are like that, and then I'll take them back and I'll redo them. I'll buff that out with a sander and then put them back in the forge, reforge them. So I'm going to, I think I got 10 of these. I need about twice that many. Having a heck of a time keeping up with it lately. Thanks for the like. I appreciate it. So I can feel that starting to get hot, and I'm not going to burn myself. I'll do one more of these, and then I'll switch my grip. What I'm doing is I'm trying to maintain some evenness in that, but it doesn't really matter, because in the next step, when we bend them, you can straighten them out in the bed. I use the same back plate for 2 different designs. That's why there's 3 holes in them. But that extra 3rd hole in that back plate sure makes that easy to maintain evenness. And so it works really good. I do these back plates 5 at a time, 5 or 6 at a time. And so it's not that big of a deal to punch that extra hole in them. You got to move along there with that, because if the slag hardens up before you go around on the other side and cut that weld in, you'll end up with porosity in there. All right, so we're going to do a couple of other things while I'm doing this. I've got them set up. I've got the back plates done. So these are towel bars. I think I've got another one here someplace. I do. Already cut out. These are toilet paper holders and towel bars that I forge. And I've got a couple of back plates laid out. Little ones. The towel bar gets a bigger plate. And I got it fairly straight. I can straighten it out in the next step. It's not that big of a deal. Toilet paper gets a small one. when you're doing this kind of stuff. You can make a jig up, but everything I do is a little different. So trying to jig this stuff up is a little challenging. When you screw one up, you can almost feel it, you know. But I'll show you that well. Some welders like certain kinds of rod better than others. And this was my first DC inverted welder. And so it took me a little while of experimenting to find a rod that this welder liked. Now I got just a little place there where, but I'm not going to mess with it. It looks fairly good. I mean, I could go back in there and you press on that. You can get in there and get that porosity out. This is the art part of that. And, you know, like a welder, a pipe fitter, or a professional welder would never be able to get away with the kind of welding that I do. It's just, they laugh. They laugh at my welding. All right, so now we're going to test some of these welds. This is kind of an old school tool. Nobody uses one of these anymore because nobody uses a stick welder anymore. This was these are kind of hard to find now. But that's the penetration that I'm looking for. Thanks for the likes. I appreciate it. And I know this isn't the greatest filming. This setup works great for welding, but not great for filming. So I'm sorry about that. I'm just having to deal with it today. Of course, this is just a little fart fan, and I've got it wired till it goes outside, and that way I'm not breathing the fume of that, and it doesn't fill the shop full of welding smoke. See, like that one, I might go in there and just touch that one up just a bit. What happens is when you bring that rod around, and the start and stop, you sometimes you get a little bit of porosity. But the good thing about this 7014 rod is if you know how to manage it, you can cook through that. You kind of just press into it. So that's pretty good. This, I'm not welding so much, I could pull that up a little more so you can see, get it in the light. So, all right, so what am I going to do with these so they're out of my way? Throw them over here. Oh, there's a bucket. Put them in that bucket right now. So, Generally what I would do is I would put these in the vise and do this in the vise. And use a loose chisel. So if you get the real pesky little splatters, I'll get in there with a loose chisel and take them off. About 95% of it. But you can see that that doesn't, for some reason, when you weld these from the top, of course, because you're not getting the heat transfer from the bottom, you don't get a big heat scald around this. And so when I heat them up, they look nice and even. If you slug weld these from the back, you end up with this big scorch on the front side. And I don't like it. And seeing how I'm the guy that's building them, I also think that this weld is stronger. I've tested these over the years and done a slug weld on the back of them, because I want you to, when you get this to your house and you hang your hat on it, I want you to be able to screw that in and then adjust these to however your hat is. So if you screw that into a good solid thing, then you can adjust this out and make it so your hat fits nice, the way you want. See, that one splashed out just a little, but it's strong. And in all the ones I have done, like I said, I've done probably 3,000 of these. I've never got one back for a broken weld. So, um, I got a couple back one time because the gal didn't like the finish on them. She thought they were going to be painted. And nothing goes out of my shop painted. Unless specified. So like right there, I've got one there that's, generally that's all it takes, but it's the fiddling around. So I've tried to hire people to come in and do this for me, this part of this cleanup, but and you'd think it would be easy for people, but there's a skill set to it, because you have to be able to knock all of the little speckles off, all the little splatter, and you got to get it all off, and you have to be able to do it without scratching up the finish or leaving big hammer marks and everything. And man, people have a hard time. There's a hard time finding somebody who has the. There's only one person that's going to keep the quality up, and that's. Oh, come on, come on, bring it! But you better work. You better be able to work. Part of the reason I've been looking for an intern, like this one, when I struck that, I got a little blob of weld right out. Well, I don't know. Can you see it there? I got a little blob of weld just on the outside. There's not much you're going to do about it. Like I said, generally I would put this in the vise to do this. Now, back in there with the primer, I can sort of blend that in. So they still have to be bent. I still have to put the coating on them. But the reason that I weld them and I set them over there and I don't use the hammer on them right away is because if your weld is still hot and you go to hitting that with that chipping hammer, you leave marks in your weld. Like, see, that's one that I'm going to have to redo. I got a little porosity in it. And it would be fine, and it's plenty strong, and nobody would notice it, but man, it bugs me. So, I'd rather have a little too much weld than not enough. If you do that right, and that's part of the reason I use this 7014 rod, is the scale just, or the, yeah, your slag just rolls off. I've tried this with, I've tried a wire feed welder. I've tried, I've done it with, I've done hundreds of them with a wire feed welder. I've used gas, shield gas. I've used inner core. I've used flux core. They all add more work than using the stick welder. It takes me longer to finish one of these by a bunch using a wire feed welder than it does the stick welder. If you're using a flux core rod, they splatter and the splatter gets everywhere and it sticks. The only way to keep the splatter from sticking to your work is to coat your work with something. Back in the day, I used Simple Green. They make a anti-stick, a splatter, but you have to remove the splat. You have to remove the soap before you can put the coating on. So that means you're adding two more steps to use the wire feed welder. Thanks, appreciate the likes. Thanks, I appreciate it. So, but this is the part of the blacksmithing thing that nobody wants to do, is the production part of this deal. Everybody wants to go build a knife or build an axe or whatever. But if you're going to make a living as a blacksmith, you almost have to do this. You almost have to, because it's the difference between being an artist and being a craftsman. That's the difference. Because being a spoon, that one turned out for it. See, that is that right there is pretty much my ideal weld. It almost looks like a TIG weld. Now, I've had my friend next door who is a inspector and done TIG welding all the time, and he does chandeliers, very high end chandeliers, and he TIG welds, and he says that you could TIG weld through that, and I could actually do these with a TIG welder. I have very little experience with a TIG welder, but from the experience I do have, TIG welders don't like like the scale, and so you have to do a lot of prep with them. And with the stick, I don't have to do the prep. And so again, it just cuts the production of these down in half. These are hat racks. They just aren't bent yet. So this goes against a wall like this, and this will be bent, and the hat hangs on here, is what these are. Most of these, see, I do this component separately. And if you're interested in watching me build those, I've got a bunch of videos. Yeah, I've done something like, I'm fairly certain I've done 3,000 of these. I think I've done 2,800 on the Etsy store. So, but the making of all of these decisions to do all this, railroad spikes, used railroad spikes, at least where I'm at here, are kind of hard to get. And that's a good point. So the value of the things that I'm making other things out of sometimes limits what I'm going to build. So far, I haven't had much trouble making, getting horseshoes. But I see a point in the future where I'm not going to be able to use used horseshoes to make stuff. So I do a lot of these hearts out of horseshoes, right? And these will be back plates. These will also be back plates for toilet paper holders, towel bars. See, this one's got a leaf on it. This is a towel bar or a paper towel bar. But I could see a time in the future where I'm not going to be able to use used shoes, and everything I do is going to have to be new. Well, you don't want to get caught. You don't want to get caught because if you get caught by the railroad, if you get caught by the railroad police, they consider that stealing. And so I did a show this summer down in Evanston, Wyoming, and I was given 2 big 5-gallon buckets of railroad spikes. But I know that is also a limited supply thing, and so I'm going to build. I'm not going to cut up the railroad spikes and sell them for a $20 thing. I'm going to take the railroad spikes and I'm going to sell them for $35 or $40 by making railroad spike knives out of them. Because I know that I have that thing and then I have a select amount of it. So I'm going to try to utilize that money as best I can. That's the business part of this thing that occupies a lot of time. It's a business and you have to run it like a business and you have to think of it like a business. See, that one don't want to come off. The last thing I'll do with these is a field test. So every one of these gets touched and handled without my gloves on after they cool off, after I do them, at least 2 or 3 times to make sure that there's nothing sharp, none of these little buttons that are left from the welding process. Are going to poke anybody in the hand. And all of that is the hard part that's the hard part of teaching people how to do this. It's not the blacksmithing part, is the easy part of teaching. It's the finish and sending out a product, because I'm selling them 5 or 6 or 8 at a time. And so they all have to be consistent. You can't have one that's way different than the rest if you're sending out 5 or 8. And so that means you have to have good jigs. And if there are going to be differences, you have to be able to hide it. That's part of the reason that I use this particular sculpted edge on these, is because if I'm just a little off, if my holes are a 1/16 of an inch off, it's not as important, because the scalloped edge of the back plate hides that. If you just have these cut square, if that hole is over a 1/16 of an inch, your eye is drawn to it. And so they just don't look as good. But I like the scalloped edge. It adds something to them. It's a blacksmith thing, right? If I didn't have the forging on there, just any old machinist could make them. So it's kind of like the boot jacks. You can buy horseshoe boot jacks on Etsy, but as far as I know, I'm the only guy who does the boot jack that I forge the shoes. There's guys on Etsy that are taking these shoes, taking a regular horseshoe, they cut them in half, they turn the heels around. Let me see if I've got one here I can show you. Maybe I got one cut in half. They take these shoes, they cut them in half, and then they weld the shoes back together like this, and they make that into the boot jack. Well, that's okay. I mean, whatever, do your own thing. But I'm a blacksmith, so I do blacksmith work. So, and it's pretty basic. I mean, you can see that this little welding rig. There's a lot of guys that would come in here and go, "Man, that's the hokiest thing I've ever seen." It's Cody Iron Works. Cody Iron Works. If you Google it, it'll come up. You can see it. I've worked very hard to get Google to recognize that. Cody, C-O-D-Y, Iron Works. Cody Iron Works. But like, I just got an order from a I guess it's a clothing store for 80 hat racks with these horse face horse heads on them. So there'll be a hat rack. They'll have the pin coming out of them, but they wanted them all forged like this, and that's 80 of them. So I can't do 80 at one time. So every day when I go live, every morning when I go live and start the forge up, I've been doing it in chapters. And this is the part of the blacksmithing that everybody hates. This is what numbs your brain. But I've come to a place in my career where I'd much rather do production work like this than custom work. Because the custom work and dealing with customers, I've gotten to a place where I'm pretty jaded by that. And so I don't want to do it. I don't want. So I'm at a place where I'm not doing much custom work now, and I'm relying on the 35 or 40 things that I build, and I'm making a living. All right. So second step of these. So I got this bucket of these. And we'll take them over to the bending station. And I'll show you how I finish them and bend them. This is one of those things that this really numbs the brain of a lot of people. So this is a setup that I use. We'll grab some gloves for this process. Okay, so this is kind of a, this little process does two things. It bends them, but it also tests my welding. So every one of these is bent cold. Every one of these is bent cold. And I test the weld. So now you can see how the hat goes on. And they work good for whatever kind of hat. I mean, a hard hats or whatever you're doing. So that is my guide. I use that angle because it works fairly well. I have had to change a couple of things over the years because one of the things that nobody considers is the shipping. And so the shipping is the most expensive part of this. Thanks, I appreciate it. Thank you. And so I've had to change the design due to shipping constraints. So I ship everything flat rate priority because it's heavy. And so the flat rate works good. And I've had to adjust the height and the length and the size of everything because the shipping has gotten so expensive. So I'll as an example, this is the size of the back plate that I used to use. And this is the size that I use now. Now you wouldn't think there's much difference in that. This is 3-inch stock. This is 3.5-inch stock. This is 5 times more expensive than this stock. And that came about the time COVID started. For some reason, that extra 1/2 inch of width on this stock made this almost 5 times more expensive than this. And so I had to change the design. Also, the shipping containers that I use changed size. Of course, they got smaller. So I used to use a 16-inch offset, and now I use a 14-inch offset because the shipping container has gotten small. Now, I could have just kept it the same, raised the price up a whole bunch on what I'm selling, but this is the economic part of this deal, and probably I'm glad I took the economics courses in college because it taught me a bunch about that stuff, about managing businesses and all of that. But it's been very challenging since COVID. What makes these easy to bend is the consistency makes these easy to bend is the consistency in this. Every one of these is the same. And I have a really, really good jig to bend those. There's no way that you could bend these freehand and have a consistent product. So you have to have, that's part of the thing about this is the imaginary arty part of this isn't necessarily the art itself, but it's the designing of the tooling. Got to be creative in the tooling designs that you use. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. The nice stuff. Liz. Well done. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been a long time. This is 36 years that I've been blacksmith. But every one of these will get touched with my bare hand, and I'll run my hand over that whole thing at least once and sometimes 2 or 3 times and make sure that there's no sticky parts. Like all of the back plates, none of the back plates are just chopped square. Every one of these back plates goes in front of a grinder, a belt grinder, and has the edges removed. And I don't use a chop saw to cut them because a chop saw, when you cut these with a chop saw, you always end up with a ragged edge. And the ragged edge from the chop saw is a lot harder to get off. You got to work at it a lot more. You're using a lot more consumables to get rid of that than the bandsaw. So I either use a bandsaw to do them, or I've got a power hacksaw that I use. And you can see all those tools in some of my other videos. But you would think that I could teach somebody how to do this easily, like bend these. But I've had some very skilled tradesmen come into this shop, and they fight that. Now, for me, it's kind of out of my, because I've just done so many of them. But for somebody just to come in here, for some welder, come in and just do these, they fight it. And that's part of the reason I don't have an apprentice in here or an intern in here. Part of doing this craftsmanship thing is developing an eye. And some people are better at seeing uniformity in something than other people. And for me, it's just probably been, well, a lot of that probably came from shoeing horses, because that's the very first thing that they teach you in farrier school is uniformity. You want the front 2 feet to be the same, you want the back 2 feet to be the same. And so they teach you to be able to tell by looking without measuring if one thing is the same as the other. And that's a skill that's developed. And I think in previous generations, it was something that was taught automatically, and now we don't do it. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those things that's gone now. We just don't teach it. So this part of this goes in a tumbler. So when I weld that, those go in a tumbler, and I generally do them like 16 or 20 at a time. Yeah. And the whole thing is about this. If I get some rando in here, if I just get some rando in the shop, and I go, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do this. And I hand him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these, 7 or whatever I've got of these, 8 of these, and I hand him these, and he screws them up. That is that's $500 worth of product. And so you have to weigh the teaching to do this with what it's going to cost you to teach them. And that's why I haven't. That's why I do this by myself, is because a lot of times the people that I get in here cost me more than they make me. And so, and of course the interns, they don't want to make this stuff. This is not the stuff that the interns want to make. They want to make knives the first thing. They want to come in and get on the hammer, and they want to do the this is the earning your stripe stuff. Computers and limit switches make things uniform. Yeah. Yeah, they waste and break. Yep, they waste and break. Efficiency has been lost a lot. And you're always weighing those things. I'm always weighing the efficiency thing. How can I make it more efficient? How can I make it cheaper? So I'm at a point with my business now. I'm at a point with the business now where I got to grow, or I got to change. Because as a one-man thing, I can only do so much work. How can I recycle this to make something better? Right. And so when I first started this, I had a ridiculous business model. Okay, now listen. I know there's 100 people listening, so I want you to listen to this business model. Okay, so I was a horseshoer. They paid me to put new shoes on the horses. And then they would pay me to take the used shoes off of the horse and put new shoes back on the horse. And the used horseshoes were waste product. Then I would take the horseshoes home and I would make stuff out of the horseshoes. And a lot of times I would sell those horseshoes right back to the same person that just paid me to put shoes on the horse and take shoes off the horse. So essentially I was getting paid 3 times for the same horseshoes. That is a fantastic business model. But what makes it bad is you can't reproduce it. Yeah, but you can't. What makes it bad is you can't reproduce it. I can't teach somebody else how to do it. It's very hard to teach somebody else how to do it. And there is no growth in it because I can only shoe so many horses. I can only make so many wine racks out of horseshoes. And so, yeah. All right. So now that I got these all brushed off, because the backs of these have all been brushed off. I did that in the first step. Last night, you guys, if you come into the live last night, you watched me doing these back plates. So I brushed off all the loose mill scale from these. Now what I got to do is we got to put the coating on them. And I use a real traditional organic coating. And you guys are going to laugh at this. Well, I have a son, and I love him very much, and he's 20. He's going to be 22 here in a few months. But he has no desire to do this as a living, and frankly, I can't blame him, because he has watched me struggle with it for the last 20 years of his life. And it's not that I struggle, but he sees that you're going to make a certain amount, and then that's it. And so you have to deal with that. You know, at 53 years old, I really can't imagine doing anything but this. You know, the days of doing that are over. The breeding thing, you know, the big families and all of that. I Children used to be a net positive when it came to your income stream, but nowadays, that no, children are definitely a net negative to your income stream. They are expensive. Children are expensive now. The government has made it so children are expensive. So what we're going to work on is I'm going to try to finish up some of what I was doing yesterday. So here, I'll get the right way of that so it's not shining. So I'm trying to do another one of these. This is part of this. Now we get to do some arty stuff. So this is the art part of this deal. This is my happy little jackrabbit head. I'm working on an ear. I ran out of gas last night. I really wanted to get it done last night, but I ran out of gas. So I got one of his. This is another head. So he's going to be pretty cute. The other part of this that I have struggled with for a very, very long time is hubris. And what I mean by that is I undervalue my talent. And here's an example. So back in the 20s and 30s, there was a very famous artist by the name of Pollock. And he did really weird paintings. The ironic part of Jackson Pollock was, before he became a famous artist, he was working in the kitchen doing dishes at the Irma Hotel here in Cody, Wyoming. Jackson Pollock, before he became a famous artist, was working as a busboy at the Irma Hotel right here in Cody, Wyoming. I'm in Cody, Wyoming. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen Jackson Pollock's paintings, but I've never been a big fan. Well, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that a certain federal agency used to use Jackson Pollock's paintings to launder money. So they would upflate his paintings to gain money for programs that this government agency wanted to do. And I think the art world, the whole art world, is a lot like that. Yeah, man, I've been really prolific in 36 years. I've gotten to a place that I go to like an auction or a estate sale, and I see my stuff at estate sale. And that's weird. That's a weird place to be as a craftsman. So anyway, the whole art thing is so subjective. And sometimes I've been able to manipulate that to help myself, and sometimes I haven't. But partially as you have to be about a half a narcissist to be a successful artist in your lifetime. And balancing the craftsman and the artist thing has always been super, super difficult for me. I've never been able to get a handle on it. It's just like these rabbits. Now I know there's some guys out there who could recreate these rabbits. It's not that big of a thing. It's not that big of a forging. And I show you how to damn do it on my YouTube channel. But to try to charge by the hour to do something like this, because I'm going to have, by the time I get done with this rabbit, I'm probably going to have 40 hours in this rabbit. Well, my shop rate's $110 an hour. So figure that out. Okay, so then you take that and you go, well, yeah, but an artist, a glass artist will make a chandelier. They'll have 100, 200 hours in that, and they will sell that thing for several $100,000. There isn't any rhyme or reason to it. It is true that your value is all about, the value of you is all about what you think it is. It's all right. You can come on in. I'm live, but you can come in. What's going on? Nothing? I'm live. I'm right in the middle of a live stream. I'm working on one of them Molesworth rabbits. So you're welcome to sit and watch, or I'll talk to you later, Joel. It's up to you. All right, sounds good. We'll see you later. Yeah. Yeah. But it's also scarcity. So these rabbits, this is not my idea. This is something that the artist has been dead for 60 years. The guy who came up with this original idea. And so I am recreating this in my style. I don't want to make a living doing them. I want to do 2 or 3 of them, and then I want to be done with them. See the power of the strike? Yeah. So this is the other ear that we're working on for Mr. Bugs Bunny here. So I got a little ways to go on. Greetings, everybody. Hello. Thanks for the likes. I know this is a little divergent from some of my other live streams I do, but I'm calling all of these live streams that I'm doing now, IRL, in real life. So you're going to get to see a blacksmith in real life. This is not staged. I'm not editing anything. You're getting to see how it goes from day to day. You're going to watch me deal with the trolls and butt hurt people. That's what this is about. And I'm not a guy who's a lawyer someplace else and then comes and films blacksmithing videos for fun. That's not what I do. I make 100% of my living using these two things and these tools to make my living. So I'm not a retired fireman. I don't have a pension. My entire well-being relies on me being able to do this work. And I'm sure there's some other guys out there that are like that, but not very many. So yeah, yay! Welcome to my welcome to my life. Yay! Isn't it fun? Actually, I have a great life. I hate authority. I've hated it. I've hated it since Miss Greenaway in kindergarten. I've hated authority. So I've facilitated a life for myself where I don't have any bosses. I don't have an alarm clock. I work as much or as little as I want. I don't have to commute. I hate commuting to work. I hate it. I hate having to get up at a specific time, prepare a vehicle, get in a vehicle, and dread for 30 or 40 minutes driving a vehicle to a job that I don't want to be at, and then working my ass off all day long, and then having to drag my ass home at the end of the day. And I've never had to do that. Last night I was in here till 10 o'clock working, and then I went in and I fell asleep. And I was very happy, and I didn't dread it, and I actually felt bad because I didn't get the rabbit done on the live stream that I wanted to do. Lazy guy. Yeah, lazy. I'm lazy. Yep, I'm a lazy guy. So I've got 1,100 videos on here. Just the last 10 years of what I've produced. I've got Pinterest photos, Instagram photos, and 10 or 15 years of Facebook photos. And you can go back and just look. You can go back and look and see what I've done. And that's just the stuff I've posted on social media in the last 10 or 15 years. And then come back, go look at that stuff, and then come back and tell me how lazy I am. People. There's guys that work harder than me for sure. But it's been my experience that most people that work for themselves, you work twice as hard for yourself as you do for somebody else. There's no shitting on company time when you work for yourself, because all the time is your time. Yeah, the jewelry. I do jewelry now. Oh, I don't have it on. I took it off. I did an artist in residence program years ago at Sundance Resort when I was the artist in residence there. Oh, the hammer. So I do a lot of jewelry, bits and spurs, jewelry. The jewelry will probably be as I get older and I'm not able to do the physical heavy stuff anymore. I'll probably start doing more of the jewelry stuff at that point. So. Yeah, that's cheating. My my treadle hammer's cheating. Some people would say that's getting smart in your old age. I should have built one 20 years ago. Okay. We're kind of doing two things at once here because I'm actually waiting for all of those hat racks to heat up so I can put my coating on them. And so that's the priority today. I don't know what time it is, but I got to get to the post office by noon. So thanks for the likes, everybody. If you're subscribing, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Generally, I'm working on two things at once at the forge, so I'll have something in there that's heating up while I'm working on something, and then you rotate out. But I've got a couple of different other projects that I'm working on now. This is kind of a good fill-in while I'm waiting for the hat racks to heat up so I can put the coating on them. And then that's the last step. That's the last step in them until I ship them. And I'm going to try to get them in the mail this morning. That's the plan. So. And then come back and build more components for more hat racks and work on this rabbit and maybe finish a knife and yeah, maybe do something fun. Here's a very valuable lesson. So a bunch of these tools that I'm using are just a bunch of leftover stuff that I got from somebody else. When they thought there was a guy I bought this big anvil from, and he had a bunch of rando tools. This is a good lesson. He clearly didn't know how to temper things. So this was a tool, just a little tool that I was using last night that somebody had made up, a little hardy tool. And, he had made this little domed bottom fuller, and it was clearly hardened steel, so it's probably made out of a piece of sucker rod or something. And then he welded it on a piece of mild steel. And when he did that, he made, because this is sucker rod or spring steel or some kind of hardenable steel, when he welded that on there, it caused that to be hardened right along that weld. Because look where it broke, right at the top of the weld. So a good blacksmith, or one that had more knowledge, would know, well, if you're going to use that hardenable steel to do that, you need to throw that whole thing in the forge and anneal that out. And then if you want the face hard, you just harden the face and then run the temper in it. But this guy clearly didn't know. And so I was whacking away with this tool last night and it came off. This is not a tool I made. This is a tool I got in a bucket full of other tooling that I got from another blacksmith. So there's something to be said for experience. So now, now I'm going to have to build another tool. I got to build a tool now because I used this tool. So I might be doing that this afternoon. How much you want to bet he did it with this one too? Years ago, there was an old blacksmith that I just a second. Years ago, there was an old blacksmith that I used to he let me hang around and I learned a lot of stuff from him. And he said, there's only two things that a blacksmith will go to hell for: beating cold iron and not charging enough. I've tried to take that to heart over the years, but in that part of my life, I don't have the hubris, I guess. Maybe. Well, I think I got a little more to go. Okay. Time to finish the hat racks. So I'm going to move you guys around here. Stand by. So I heat these up to, I don't know, 300 degrees, something like 300 degrees or something like that. And then that's the finish. And I know that camera sucks. I'm sorry. This is my not so sweet sauce that I use. So that's the coating. Got a few more to do. Stand by. NJ, do you ever burn yourself? Yeah, every day. I burn myself every day. But, in the words of Patrick Swayze, pain don't hurt. All right, everybody. So that's the finished hat racks. So once they cool off, I'm going to put them in the packaging, wrap them up, put them in the packages, and they go out today, hopefully. If I can make it to the post office in time. Thanks for sticking around. I'll probably be back live later after I get back from the post office, and I'm going to shave part of this ridiculous World War, Civil War beard off, and we'll go back to work later. Thanks. Get it hot and heavy. Always wear your safety squats. If you like the content, please slip over to the Etsy store and share some love. You don't have to buy anything. Just go over there and like some stuff. It helps the algorithm. Cody Iron Works. Thanks, everybody.